Dr. Hoff, when we had him on, he mentioned that some of the technology that people have used for velocity-based training has required like they'll pause at the bottom and pause at the top of a rep so that the device has a chance to kind of like reset to get more accurate measurements. But then you lose, your validity of like that's not really how we lift in the weight room, unless you're like a competitive power lifter, right? Like there's some issues there. So is that something that you would be concerned about at all, or is that
I respectfully disagree with that statement. I think if you think in terms of physiology, there's a lot of benefit in adding a pause between the eccentric and the concentric muscle action. And I just give you a very simple analogy. Um, I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. I hope it gets the message across. Like, if you want to get better at something, like physical, like running, jumping, throwing, whatever the case may be, you want whatever exercise you're doing, whatever task you're trying to accomplish, to be challenging, right? Like you want it to challenge the system to drive that adaptation forward. Um, that challenging comes with more effort that is required of you to be able to perform that task, and that effort requires more involvement of like different systems within the body, energy system, your CNS, your muscles, whatever the case may be. When you're looking at lifting in general, and you want to get stronger, there's one thing about you wanting to get stronger, and one thing about you want to be stronger what you're doing. Meaning, you want the exercise to be challenging you to get you stronger, or you want the exercise to put you in a condition to be the strongest. They're two different and competing side of the spectrum. They don't necessarily have to match. One is training, one is performance. Now, if you want to lift weights and those weights to be as heavy as they humanly can possibly be, you want no pause between the eccentric and the concentric. You want to probably bounce a little bit at the bottom, use that. I wouldn't
stretch,
call
shorten
it the
cycle?
stress shortening cycle
Oh,
because
okay.
the range of motion is too long to be considered plyometrics and the timing of it is off. But nevertheless, a little bit of that potentiation because that's going to allow you to lift a lot of weight. If you're in a powerlifting meet or a weightlifting meet, that's how you win. So you want that. But that's not what's getting you stronger. What's getting you stronger is eliminating that benefit, that boost of energy that comes from elastic energy, momentum, and all that good stuff to put your CNS in a condition to having to put maximum effort in the lift. And you do that if you pause at the bottom of the eccentric. You want to be that initial spike in rate of force development, which is what really drives adaptation, to be due to your brain activating your muscles and not elastic energy in the system making the lift easier for you. So it really depends on what you're looking at. And I think, and actually, I know because I've tested that and I can measure that on force plates, that when I do velocity based training and I do respect that little pause at the bottom, which is not that big of a deal, it just forces you to lower the weight by 5-10% at best. It's not
Hmm.
like you have to go off your 1 max to be able to train. It's just a little bit less. It's a good pause, and for that pause up, you just accelerate as fast as you humanly possibly can. The overall and long-term changing rate of force development are second to none. Like the type of adaptation you get from it, and we have evidence to support it. So it's not just my empirical experience. There's a whole field of studies on early rate of force development showing what's the best way to develop it. So that's why I disagree because for training purposes, well, if you have to take a pause, so be it. Take a pause and get stronger. But then if you actually want to lift a lot of weight, then the pause is no longer beneficial. I agree with that. With the athletes I'm working with, those sessions that are not VBT sessions, and we normally start at 85% of water max or even above that, I'm not going to ask them to pause. Not out of
Yeah.
my mind. They're going to do whatever they need to do to lift the weight because at that point, the type of adaptation we're after is mostly the endocrine system. We want those weights to be heavy to prime a significant increase in testosterone. That's what we want. Magnitude of load to be the biggest possible. But then when we finesse our approach and we look at the neuromuscular component, and now we're looking at rate of force development, we're working on the functioning of the neuromuscular system. Then we pause, we go a little lighter, maybe 70 to 80%, depending on how strong they are. And then we add VBT, and that's where we really prime that neuromuscular component of it. And they all work together. It's hormones, it's neuromuscular system, it's your muscles, it's your tendons. You have to develop them all. And there's a place for everything. But in general, I wouldn't agree that pausing at the bottom is at any point
Yeah.
concerning.
I don't. I mean, I do a lot of pause reps and pin presses and all kinds of stuff like that. Like, it's more. I think what I was trying to get at was more like when you look at the research. If you see a study where the entire study was paused, like how do you incorporate that into your programming? If you're not doing paused reps or You know, like how do you roll in that little bit of information about the actual method of the study and the device used into applications with a different type of device, you know?
You, I get that. You read the methods and you read what they've done. If there are people with a little bit of common sense, that pause is not going to be longer than a second or so,
Yeah.
because then it becomes challenging. But if they're doing it in a laboratory setting where you absolutely need like a 4 seconds pause at the end of every segment of the movement, that is not very applicable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a trade-off. You want to
Yeah. And,
pause enough to make it more challenging, but not too long that you're destroying your chances of lifting weights.
uh-huh.
There needs to be an epi compromise.